To grasp the significance of this seemingly odd parable of Jesus, it will be helpful to see the world in which he lived. So just a little lesson on first century Palestine. Rich landowners lived in cities. They constituted what we might call the millionaires and billionaires, the wealthiest 1% of ancient Palestine at the time of Jesus. In turn, the landowners hired managers to supervise their land. In this case, property devoted to olive trees and wheat fields. The manager lived next to or on the land, and those who worked the land, that would be poor laborers, poor peasants, lived in the nearby village. Rich landowners became rich without lifting a finger through the manual labor of village peasants whose work produced the harvest of olives, olive oil, and wheat to be sold in the cities. The manager was paid for his work in the form of a percentage of what the peasants harvested. And the peasant laborers retained at best 10% of the produce, a percentage that meant they would never escape poverty. Their children and their children's children would be consigned to harsh labor as well. To say the least, village laborers viewed absentee landowners as corrupt and greedy individuals who cared nothing for the harsh conditions of labor and poverty in which they worked. No love was lost. In this story told by Jesus, the manager was accused of mishandling the owner's land, a squandering of property or produce with no details offered. We're not sure. By law, the owner could do one of two things. He could take the manager to court and demand full repayment for the losses incurred, or he could have the deceitful manager imprisoned. In both cases, the manager's malfeasance would become public knowledge and ensure that the manager would never be hired again by anyone. A man consigned to the lower status of a laborer, going from manager to laborer, or a homeless beggar. He alludes to that, doesn't he, when he says, I don't have the strength to dig, and I don't want to be homeless. But the owner does the unexpected thing. There is no court hearing. There is no prison. He simply dismisses the manager privately in what was an astonishing act of mercy. Jesus then notes that before the laborers could know the misconduct of the newly dismissed manager, I know that's a mouthful, he, the manager, seeks to have friends, find friends who will assist him now that he is no longer working for the owner. He does this cleverly by decreasing the amount of oil and wheat owed by the laborers, thus allowing them to retain for their own use two staples of the Mediterranean diet: bread and olive oil. For the impoverished peasant laborers who lived hand to mouth, this too was an unexpected act of generosity, an act of mercy that would prompt incredible celebration in the village. We might say an unexpected windfall out of nowhere. Thus, when Jesus says, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, he is not suggesting that his followers engage in deceitful financial practices. That might be a sadness for some, though let me add that the history of Christianity is filled with people who have done so, but rather encourages his followers to recognize what is at the heart of this story, this parable. Two people who did the unexpected. That is, two people with terrible reputations who could have made life miserable for others, but instead acted with mercy, with generosity. Now, I think this is a challenging, if not a troubling, story for you and for me. For we live in a culture that encourages us repeatedly to protect, to hold on to whatever money, wealth, or treasure we have earned or inherited. Does it ring a bell? My financial guy is saying all the time, hold on to it. Don't make a risky investment for fear that you might lose it. Hold on to it, Sam. And thus, as wages stagnate, costs rise, and the American middle class begins to evaporate, there emerges the fear of becoming poor, of living in a lower status than one hoped for. And so the urge to close one's hand around what one has, little or great, becomes quite strong. Indeed, it was the closed hand that appeared in statues found in medieval churches, the closed hand tightly grasping a bag of coins, a sign of being closed off to others, of demonstrating one's concern only for oneself. On the other hand, it was the open hand that was praised as the sign of virtue. For the open hand signified the person who saw money or produce as something to be shared. Can you imagine that? Money exists to be shared? Rather than protected or hoarded, money or produce exists to be given away. That is, being generous is the virtue, the capacity that illuminates one cares for others, even those who a society or family or political party might say are supposedly undeserving. For no one is undeserving of life, are they? The open hand is also the hand that can receive from another, that signals the soul willing to admit its dependence on another. And so I wonder if you've noticed that we do not grab the communion bread or the wine cup, but rather open our hands, the small hands of children, the wrinkled hands of people my age, to receive the precious treasure of the Lord's body and blood. And I wonder if you've ever noticed that each person receives the same amount, regardless of gender, race, or social status. Here again, it seems that generosity is extended to all, not just the few, not just the so-called privileged. Indeed, I want to say there is an economy at work flowing from this table. An economy in which goods, food, and drink are shared equitably. A generosity that does not ask anyone to prove their worthiness before receiving. an economy so different than the one in which we live, in which a few have more than enough and many have little. In his contemplation of the significance of the Mass, the medieval German mystic Meister Eckhart wrote this: "Not only bread, but all things necessary for sustenance in this life are given on loan to us, given on loan to us, given because of others, given for others, given to others through us." Dear friends, I say, let your open hand here at this altar lead you out there into a world that is in profound need of your generous spirit.